Welcome to Partnerships for Profit, the podcast where we bring you inside the world of joint ventures, strategic partnerships, and powerful collaborations. Each episode, you'll dive into conversations with top entrepreneurs, visionaries, and business leaders, unlocking the secrets to building profitable relationships that drive growth and success. Whether you're looking to expand your network, find new referral partners, or scale your business, you're in the right place. Let's get started.
Welcome to Partnerships for Profit, presented by LeDuc Entertainment. Today, we are joined by Melissa Gamarra, an entrepreneur and the owner of Melissa Gamarra Management. Melissa, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Can you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Melissa Gamarra Management?
Yeah, so I am what you call an integrator. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with EOS or any of the verbiage that they use, it's Entrepreneurial Operating System is what EOS stands for. And EOS has coined the term visionary and integrator. So a visionary is an entrepreneur that often has big vision ideas and, is usually the head and the face of a company. And then there is the opposite of that, which is an integrator. It's the person who sits behind the scenes, who makes everything happen, who manages your team. And so I am an integrator. A lot of times I work with multiple different types of clients and multiple different types of businesses to execute whatever their plans are, launches, any types of product development, managing their team. So that's a little bit about what I do and what Melissa Gamarra Management is about. I am a mother of three. I've been doing integrator work as kind of a freelancer, I guess is the proper term for that, for about 7 years. I'm going on my 7th year in 2025, which is very exciting. And I started out doing freelance bookkeeping and quickly found myself in the world of managing other people and making sure that things were going off without a hitch on the administrative front and making sure that launches were going really well. So I went through the EOS process for becoming kind of their integrator and going through their master classes and things like that, really familiarizing myself with the EOS side of things and started offering that as my main service. And so I've been doing that now for about 7 years, which is really exciting.
And can you tell us a little bit about the people that you help, or the businesses that you help? What are some of the pain points that you're helping them solve?
Yeah, so a lot of times visionaries, because they have a big vision, they want to stay at that 30,000 foot view. But if you don't have somebody who's managing your team or creating launch plans for products or just, handling kind of the day to day and mapping that all out and giving people instructions on what to do, unfortunately, the visionary has to kind of sit in that seat. And you can't be 30,000 feet and also down here in the weeds with your team in the day to day, really thinking through what needs to happen next, who needs to be doing what, did they actually get that thing done? And so a lot of times I work with entrepreneurs who are primarily in the online space. So a lot of times coaches, consultants, occasionally people who work in e-commerce and product sales. So that's typically who I work with. And when I come in and I talk to them, they're often telling me the same thing over and over again, which is I'm too far in the weeds. I'm too much into the day to day. I can't literally hear myself think. I can't see the forest amongst the trees because I'm spending so much time following up with people. I'm not in my genius. My genius is up here creating new ideas, thinking about what products my customers want, thinking about, PR things like being on podcasts and who do I need to be strategically connecting with. And so a lot of times they will bring me in to handle those day-to-day operations so that they can fully sit in that visionary seat and really be up at that 30,000 foot view, coming up with new plans, new products, new ideas, which is their zone of genius. And so that's typically the pain point that I solve for them.
And these terms, the visionary and the integrator, can you tell us a little bit about, what type of a personality, what type of a person makes a good visionary and what type of a person makes a good integrator?
That's a great question. And there isn't necessarily a one size fits all, but I will say that the people who are more commonly visionaries, they are people who are typically very creative. They're often looking for solutions for other people's problems. They have no shortage of ideas for what could be a business or what could be a product. They often find themselves feeling like, I want to just connect with people. They're social butterflies 9 times out of 10. And so if you find yourself in an area where you have a lot of creative juice and you're constantly thinking like, ooh, that could be a business, or this could be a product, or I would love to help this person do this thing, and you're constantly thinking in that way, chances are you're probably a visionary. A lot of times, I think you'll hear people call that bright, shiny object syndrome. And if it's not really tailored in and kind of given a container to operate within, it can turn into bright, shiny object syndrome. But I would say most often visionaries are very outgoing people. They're very creative people. Again, I'm speaking very generally. There are visionaries who don't fall into that category, but 9 times out of 10, it's the person who would historically probably have like ADHD. They're kind of all over the place. They have lots of ideas. So that's usually what I see in visionaries. As far as integrators, a lot of times it's people who are really able to think strategically. They're thinking about, how do I solve problems? How do I make sure that things go more smoothly? How do I operationalize stuff? So they often thrive on organization and structure and really get a lot of joy out of helping people get things accomplished and helping, move businesses forward. So typically those people don't want to be at the forefront. So they might be a little bit more introverted. I break that mold a little bit. I am very extroverted, which works out pretty well in terms of connecting with a visionary, because that is a big piece of working with visionaries, and having that visionary integrator connection is having lots in common, and also, having your different strengths. But I would say more often than not, they are introverted people who don't mind being on the back end. They don't want to be the face of the company. They often are less creative and a bit more organizational in nature. They, really thrive on putting systems and processes in place and making sure that people are doing what they're supposed to. That's typically what I see as far as personality types.
So in your role, you help businesses scale and grow efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
And when you come in to work with a business or an entrepreneur to help them scale their business, do you find that it is a one size fits all approach, or is it very custom tailored? Could you kind of walk us through some of the steps involved in that process?
Yeah. So it can be a little bit of both, funny enough. Often I will come in, and the approach and the systems that they need to have put in place can vary wildly. I can come into larger businesses doing $1 million plus that need full foundational overhaul. So job description changes, they need help with putting task management systems in place, and understanding their org chart and putting all of those really foundational pieces in place. And sometimes I will come into those businesses and they already have a really strong foundation, but they're having a lot of issues with the building that is built on top of that foundation. So whatever else is in the company, this could be they're having trouble getting beyond $1 million in their annual revenue. And I'm just using $1 million as a round number, but they might be having problems with product sales, or they might be having issues with team turnover. And these aren't always necessarily foundational problems. But if you have a really strong foundation and you're seeing that as like a down pipeline effect, you're going to want to look at, okay, do we need to innovate our products? Are we having trouble on the hiring side because of, maybe the visionary is, not communicating problems very well. And so then that's festering. There's a lot of different things that can happen. But in terms of the solution for each of these, that's where more of that templatized kind of structure exists, where it can be more rinse and repeat. So I like to think of having a toolkit. I have this toolkit of tons of different templates for things. This could be org chart stuff. This could be job description stuff. It could be launch plans for a variety of different products. I have a lot of different tools in my tool belt. And so the structure around which tool gets implemented changes from business to business. However, the actual template itself that gets implemented as a fix, that is going to be pretty much the same every single time. And I do try to find the newest thing, right? Whatever's on the cutting edge. So launch strategies, for example, they change all the time. You all are in marketing. You understand that marketing shifts every single day, basically. And so I do try to stay on the cutting edge of stuff like that, so that as markets change, I'm not implementing a tool that is ancient, right? Because obviously if a chainsaw exists and you're over here using a handsaw, it's not gonna be the most efficient use of everybody's time. So to answer your question in a very long-winded way, depending on what the business has going on will determine what tool I use, but the tools are pretty much the same every single time, and we just plug and play depending on what their problems are.
And have you found, I know that, this might be kind of a little bit of an out there question, but
Yeah.
have you found that with sort of the emergence now of AI technologies, has that added more tools to your tool belt when you go in to work with these businesses? And if so, how has that changed?
Yeah. Oh man. With AI, it is another tool in the tool belt. However, not necessarily in terms of some of the more foundational things. So when
Right.
it comes to accountability chart, organizational chart, putting together, it can help with job descriptions, which is great. I think about AI as being a crutch, essentially, for me to do my job in a way that is faster and more efficient. And maybe crutch isn't the right word. Maybe assistant, or I guess a tool that helps me. But in terms of it coming up with incredible things for job descriptions and organizational charts and things like that, often if I'm using AI as a tool to supplement some of my own creativity, if you will, and some of my own expertise and skills, if I'm using it to help some of that, then I'm often having to do a little bit of refinement on the back end. So, for example, I use ChatGPT pretty much every day at this point to help me with, hey, how would you write this job description in a different format? Do we want to do this differently? Or funny enough, I asked ChatGPT today about a podcast launch strategy and what has changed over the years as far as a podcast launch, because I have a client who's getting ready to launch a podcast in 2025. So it definitely is a tool, but it is not a singular tool where I can plug and play like some of the
Right.
other things that I have. I use it more as a way to amplify some of the skills that I already have and make me more efficient, or make other people on the team more efficient, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And it sounds like when you go to work with these businesses that they're facing, numerous challenges across the board, but is there one particular issue or one particular challenge that business owners and entrepreneurs are facing that you see more often than others, or is it just wildly different every time?
Um, Mostly there are a lot of differences on the outskirts, but I would say 9 times out of 10, I'm being brought in because of issues with their team. Now, whether that is actually an issue because the team is not doing what they're supposed to be doing, whether it's that the business owner is not communicating efficiently with the team. A lot of times I will come in and the business owner will say things like, the team is very task oriented. So they will do what they're told, but I'm having to do all of the telling them what to do, giving them the instructions, following up. Did it get done? I'm double checking. So the business owner is often having to do 70 to 80% of the work. And then there's just somebody on the other end who's doing the execution piece of all the instructions. And this often takes up so much of the entrepreneur's time that it then becomes a significant pain point. And they come talk to me and they're like, I need somebody who can take over all of this work for making sure that my team can actually do what they're supposed to do. And 9 times out of 10, it's because the people on the team have not been given the autonomy to make decisions. And so we regularly have to have conversations about, well, are you actually giving them the space to be creative themselves? Are you actually saying, hey, put this thing together, tell me what you think about this one particular project and how you would execute it, and bring it back to me, and then I will make minor tweaks, therefore shifting the responsibility back on the team. And a lot of times that takes majority of the work off of the business owner's plate. And then I will come in and typically handle some of that double checking, making like follow up. Did it get done? Is it in a task management system? Those types of things. But I would say 9 times out of 10, this problem with the team is the catalyst for people coming and hiring me, because things are not getting done, or the business owner is running out of capacity because they're spending so much time just managing their team, essentially.
Well, and I'm glad that you brought up talking about task management and task management systems, because one of the things that I was really interested in talking with you about was the importance of SOPs. And I was hoping that you could kind of outline that for the listeners and why SOPs, what are they? Why are they so important? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I love to talk about SOPs. So SOPs are standard operating procedures for anybody who's not familiar with that acronym. Essentially, these are rinse and repeat instructions that give your team the power to do something over and over again and not missteps. And it's also a really great way to make sure that you are effectively communicating expectations with your team, which then allows you to have recourse if expectations are not met. So it serves multiple different purposes. A, setting your team up for success, and B, making sure that you have clear expectations that people can be held accountable to in the long run. Now, I like to look at SOPs as something that can be done in multiple different ways. You can have written SOPs, which I think is what most people are familiar with, which is like step-by-step instructions written out. What is the purpose? What is the policy? When was this last updated? Right. So if you show people a written SOP, it's going to look very corporate and it's going to feel very cold and they're a little bit challenging to work with. So I'm not the biggest fan of written SOPs. I'm actually more of a fan of video SOPs where you can show people through a software like Loom, for example. You can screen share and show people exactly like, I'm coming here. This is where this thing is. This is why I'm doing this. This is how this works. Most people are visual learners. And I find that video SOPs are much stronger and people are much more likely to actually pay attention to them and really understand what it is that they're doing when there's a video that they can watch on 1.5 speed or whatever it is that they choose to do as far as how they consume that information. But I find that if I give people a big long page of like step-by-step instructions, oftentimes they don't read it fully, or if they do read it fully, they don't have the same level of comprehension about what it is that they're supposed to be doing. So I find that the video SOPs are super strong. And I also will use for rinse and repeat style tasks. I'll use actually a task management system to build out what I like to call task flows, which is essentially one parent task, which could be, let's just say it's podcast production, just because we're on a podcast, right? So it could be for episode 1 of a podcast, you might have multiple different steps listed underneath that as like subtasks of this one bigger task that then can be assigned out to various members of the team. It could be record the podcast, schedule the guest, get the bio and headshot. You could have lots of different steps to that, which then allows you to have kind of a real life action step SOP, if you will, that really helps you keep track of where you're at in that process. And it helps to make sure that things don't get forgotten. So I like to use the video SOP and then these task flows accompanied together to help make sure that there's real action steps. And there's also really wonderful instructions that they can look at if they're a new hire or if they just need a refresher. So those are kind of the 3 different ways that you could do it. And I think those last 2 options are really wonderful for setting expectations and holding people accountable.
It's it's one of those things that it seems so simple, yet so many businesses and entrepreneurs aren't utilizing that, right?
Absolutely. I often will come into businesses and they have none. They have no SOPs. And I think a lot of times the reason why is because most people think about SOPs as this big, long document that you have to like really sit down. You have to take 20 minutes to type it all out. And it's for a task that in actuality, the task itself takes 5 minutes, maybe 7 minutes. But because you have to type it out, you have to think through what it is. You have to put all these extra details in there. You maybe even have to go get screenshots. So you have to stop writing and then go get a screenshot and then come back. So a lot of people think about SOPs in this very formal, corporate, traditional way. And it doesn't have to be like that. You could just do the task and record yourself doing it and explain it like somebody who's sitting right next to you. And there you go. You did 2 birds, 1 stone. You have an SOP now, and you did the task that you needed to do anyway. And when I tell people that they can do it this way, and I give them that like permission, if you will, it opens up a whole entire new world for a lot of different people, because as visionaries, sitting down to write an entire document is the equivalent of a teenager having to write a 15-page essay and hand that into their teacher. Like, they don't want to do it because it sucks, frankly, you know? So this is why I really am just more and more focused on using Loom videos. Loom is a software. You can have like a little Google Chrome extension and it records you while you do things. You get shareable links from Loom. Like, it's so easy to operate, and you just turn it on while you do something. And then you can take that shareable link and put it into a document or into a task management system. And you have a full library of SOPs. And so that is the easier way to do it. But most people don't realize it can be that easy. So they often don't have them.
And can you talk to us a little bit about your approach to helping businesses hire? And furthermore, can you tell us a little bit about, why is it so important to have the right person in the right position?
Yeah. Yeah. So I have a really solid hiring process, and it is very lengthy. And the reason why it is lengthy is because it is very important to find the right person and to really kind of put them through a couple of different hoops to assess whether or not they are actually going to be a solid hire and they're going to be able to do the things that you want them to do. Now, I'll start with your second question, because I think that one is really important. Then we'll talk about the specifics of how I make sure that happens. So when it comes to hiring somebody, the reason why it is so important to hire the correct person the first time, and hopefully you don't have to hire them a second time, but even more so, it's really important if you run that process again, that you hire the right person the second time, is because it's expensive. It's so expensive in time, in resources, in money to actually find the right person, because you might be paying to post on like a LinkedIn or an Indeed if it's an in-person position. So there's actual monetary, like a monetary piece to hiring somebody if you choose to go that route. And then there's the time that needs to be spent training them. You have to make sure that you have all of these SOPs, all of the right materials for them to actually do their job effectively. So if you don't have those, you have to take the time to actually create those before you hire this person. So there's a lot that goes into hiring somebody in time, energy, resources. And if you don't do it correctly the first time, you then might not know that you have hired the wrong person for like 30 to 45 days potentially. And it really won't weed itself out until you've given them several things to do. And the unfortunate part of that is that they might do something that they're not supposed to do, which then costs you even more money. So that's obviously a separate problem. But when we're talking about why it's so expensive, because you also have to consider the first 30 to 45 days after you hire them, they might be working on like a sales page. For example, if you hired a website designer or a tech VA, they might be working on a sales page and they might have the wrong purchase price listed. And so then you have all these customer service problems that then somebody has to deal with. So there's a lot that goes into that. And then if you don't find out for 30 to 45 days, then you have to let them go and you have to start the hiring process all over again, which again takes time, takes money, takes energy, all of these things. And so if you can be super clear at the front and say, this is what we're looking for, this is exactly how much we're willing to pay, this is how long we're willing to go in like our trial period of this person to determine whether or not this is going to be a good fit. If you can be clear about all these things up front and come up with a really solid job description for that person, and really understand where they fit in the org chart as far as accountability and responsibility, you're going to be much more successful with your hiring efforts, which will then result in a longer term hire who's actually doing the work that you want them to do, rather than creating more work for you as the business owner or as somebody who's managing your team. Because you definitely don't want this person to create more work. You want them to create less work because they're taking things over. So when you look at the hiring process, I think it's really important that you go through several stages. And one of the most important stages that I have people go through as part of my hiring process is a skills assessment. And I do this through video submissions, through test projects, through a variety of different questions that I'm asking them that are related to the job that they're going to be taking on. And I do this as like a second step in the process. So I can really weed people out for things like, hey, this is not going to be a good personality fit because they've, maybe said something during the process that like, that's actually not a core values fit. We unfortunately can't make that work. Or you're going to really start to see, they actually don't know what it is that they're talking about in this scenario. They're just, again, coming back to the essay metaphor, when you're typing an essay and you use a whole bunch of filler words just to make it longer so that it actually meets requirements. This happens in videos as well. When you see video submissions from people, sometimes they use a whole bunch of filler words and they don't actually say anything. So this is a really great opportunity for me to check and make sure, do you actually know what you're doing? Can you actually do a test project and get the same result that I got when I put it together? And this is a really surefire way to make sure that you're hiring a person who has the skills and the temperament and the personality and the core values fit that you need for your company. And then you don't have to rehire again.
So you help businesses achieve sustainable growth. And I'm curious, is there ever a situation where you've, been brought in to help a business and yes, they're growing and they're seeing growth, but are there any markers where you kind of look at it and say, yes, you're achieving growth, but that's not sustainable growth?
Yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit? What's the difference between sustainable and unsustainable growth?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a book by, I think it's Dan Sullivan. It's either Dan Sullivan or Dan Martell, and I can't quite remember off the top of my head, but it's called 10x is easier than 2x. And it talks a lot about looking at your systems and asking yourself, can I run 10 times the volume through this system that I'm currently running? And so I often will ask myself the exact same question when I come into a business. Yes, you are growing, but are you growing at a 1x rate? And if we decided to grow at 10x tomorrow, this is going to break. Like if we ran 10x the people through this system that you're currently running, is that going to fall apart? And oftentimes the answer is yes. So you might have a system that is working for you currently, and it is able to handle the slow growth that you are currently experiencing. But if you were to ramp that up by like 10x or sometimes even 5x or 3x, it magically starts falling apart very quickly because there are pieces of it that are manual, right? You might have somebody on your team who's manually reaching out to people to get calls scheduled. Okay, well, that system's not going to work if you run 1,000 people through this same process because it's just one person. So we either need to hire more people to do the manual work, or we need to figure out a way to automate the current process. And so a lot of times I will come in and these people are experiencing growth, but it's painstaking growth. It's very slow growth. The visionary is often in the day-to-day having to drive a lot of that growth and really hold people accountable so stuff doesn't fall through the cracks. Think about like holding everything together, and all of a sudden it's like any moment, if they add one more thing to all the stuff they're holding, it's going to just fall apart. And so that's usually the marker that I will use as kind of a litmus test for whether or not you're achieving growth or whether you're achieving sustainable growth.
Right. And it sounds like you've helped a lot of businesses, a lot of entrepreneurs. In your time helping businesses and entrepreneurs, is there maybe a story or an example? Is there a story that maybe stands out when you look back at all the businesses you've helped where you think where you see really a transformation in the business as a result of your guidance and help? Is there maybe a story you can share that really stands out?
Yeah. Funny enough, I'm actually working in a business currently where we've seen such a massive shift between where the business was when I first started, even just 6 months ago, to where it is now. And this is mostly seen within the team. So we came into this, I say we, but really me came into this business because I'm not an agency. I'm not a team. It's just me. And so I came into this business and started poking around and magically found that the foundation of this business was very mushy, very unclear. A lot of people on the team were doing multiple different jobs. And so there was, hands in every single cookie jar. It was really hard to tell where the accountability was lying with the team. There was a lot of animosity between the visionary and the members of the team. There was a lot of negativity, and we were looking at potentially having a significant amount of turnover very soon if things didn't change. And so came in and started really shoring up the foundation, really putting in clear job descriptions, accountability chart, org chart, who's reporting to who. We need to, remove people out of these areas. We maybe need to hire over in these areas. Started putting together SOPs, cleaning up their task management system, which was a huge undertaking. Everything was a mess. And the way that it was being used by the team, it was super inconsistent. Everybody was using it differently. So putting an SOP in place for how to even use that system, there were all these things that had to be done that were very foundational. This business was doing $1 million+ a year. And so the fact that this foundation was just so mushy, and this business is doing over $1 million in revenue every year, just goes to show that, like, just because it's working and it's fine, it doesn't mean that it's going to work long term. So again, that sustainability piece. Well, sorry, I was just
go ahead.
About yesterday, I actually met with this business owner, and she told me that she had met with 2 members of the team where there was a significant amount of animosity between her and this member of the team. And this person had told her that they are more satisfied in their job than they have ever been in the past just 2 months, just because of some of the changes that we've made. And the business owner was telling me, hey, I was thinking about letting this person go. And I'm actually in a place where I think they're going to do really well in this new role that we've given them. And I'm super happy with what they've been doing so far. So just that transformation alone in fixing the relationship between these 2 different people and making sure that the business is set up for success in the long run so that they can start to really see that exponential growth. That's so far the biggest transformation that I've seen. And I think because it affects the people, the downstream people.
Well, and you're helping people, you're helping entrepreneurs, you're helping businesses. Is that drive to help people something that's just innate to your character, or is that something you've cultivated along the way?
Yeah, this is such a great question. I actually had a client who was really big into divine purpose, and several years ago asked me a lot of probing questions about what I feel my divine purpose is. And I couldn't answer that question right off the top of my head. I was like, man, I don't know. Nobody's ever asked me this. And my divine purpose it's not my family. It's not all these other external things. But what it came down to was it's helping people. My divine purpose is using my gifts to help other people. So my unique ability to see the forest amongst the trees, even if I'm in the day-to-day, making sure that people are doing what they're supposed to, getting everybody organized, everybody rows the boat in the same direction so that we can start to achieve that growth and allow the visionary to step back into their kind of divine purpose. That brings me so much joy, and being able to do that for other people is something that I would do it for free. Like, that's just something that I love so much. And it brings me a lot of fulfillment. And so when I think about what is my divine purpose, what was I put on this earth to do, I truly feel like it is helping people with the gifts that I have that they may not have.
And you're helping people. Melissa, this has been an absolutely awesome conversation. If any business owner or entrepreneur listening could use your help and could use the help of Melissa Gamarra Management, how do the people find you?
Yeah, so you can go to melissagamarramanagement.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. My last name is quite unique, as we were talking about before this podcast. So it's pretty easy to find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Facebook or Instagram as well. Melissa Gamarra Management across all of those platforms.
Well, Melissa, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been an absolutely fascinating conversation, really insightful. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for listening. This has been Partnerships for Profit, presented by LeDuc Entertainment. Melissa, thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Partnerships for Profit. We hope you've gained valuable insights on how to form profitable partnerships and take your business to the next level. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. Got a partnership story to share or someone you'd like to see featured on the show? Reach out to us. Until next time, keep building those partnerships for profit.